Hello everyone, welcome to round number 6 of the Superbet Chess Classic 2022 in Romania. And the highlight of this round is Levon Aronian's win against MVL. Already, it was actually an easy win for Levon. MVL was lost in his preparation, and somewhere in the end, he was into this mating net, but he couldn't stop. So that was it. That was the story of the day. Let's check it out. Lagrave started with d4. Levon went for knight f6. c4, e6, knight c3, bishop b4. As always, we have this Nimzo Indian on the board. Okay, Lagrave went for knight f3, d5. Okay, there's a sudden change from Nimzo. Now we have this Ragozin. Okay, with the d5, it's Ragozin. If black continues with castle, we are still into the Nimzo Indian territory. Okay, let's say, for example, you play queen c2, d5. But with early d5, delaying casting, we are into the Ragozin. Lagrave went for bishop g5, takes on c4. Now the take on c4 goes into the Vienna. Okay, we now have the Vienna game. e4, very sharp. c5. Okay, bishop takes on c4. Now if here white goes for e5, takes on d4, this is also playable. Queen can check on a4, knight c6. And castle queen side. So this is another way to play the game here with bishop d7 and knight into e4. This is also very interesting here. But MVL went for b takes c4. Aronian played c takes d4. Knight takes d4, takes on c3. Takes on c3. Now we have a target now on a5. Sorry, on c3 with queen a5. Isolated pawn on c3. Bishop b5 check. Knight b d7. All right. Takes on f6. Takes on c3 first. Intermediate check. Here Lagrave went for king e2. All right. This is actually an old idea, an old move. Okay, the familiar line here is king f1. It's still very popular these days, king f1. You take on f6 and we have h4. This is actually the trend these days. And for example, black plays queen b4, then we can go for rook h3 here. Aronian had this game against Rajabov, where they drew. It went on with a6, bishop into e2, would be 1, queen d6, bishop d7. It was in the air things, masters. So for me, I'd like to play this line with king f1. I'm not really a fan of king e2. Okay, queen to b2, queen d2, queen takes d2, king takes d2. White thought that with the early exchange of queens, that he gets c file, right? He gets the open c file and also the 7th rank. But the problem is with this d file, black has that counterplay. And Aronian was actually well prepared here. Rook d8, king e3 for white, knight into b6. Knight goes back to b3, f5. All right, again, breaking the structure, the pawn in front of the king. Well, the pawn cannot take this f5 pawn. There's knight b5 hitting the rook. Here, Lagrave, a bit unfamiliar of the situation, he went back to d3. Okay, with f5, I guess white should play f3 here. Although in this position, you would prefer black with the end game here with the structure right here on e4. Yeah. You can exchange it on d7, takes on d7, rook takes, knight takes, and put this knight on e5. But more or less, white could hold. But with this majority and an isolated pawn, black has a little bit of a chance to win the game. So Lagrave went for bishop to d3. Rook b8. Nice move by Aronian. The point of rook b8 is to protect b7 so he could give freedom to his bishop with this move e5 and bishop e6. It's actually a prophylactic move. Yeah. f4. This is, I guess, the decisive mistake of the game. Lagrave missed this move e5. Well, instead of f4, I think he should play rook g1, rook c1, maybe, yeah. Or maybe just f3 still. I still believe f3 is better than f4. Because with f4, oh my god, this move is a killer blow. This is already better for black. Now with that pawn on f4 being under attack, being undermined by e5, again, you cannot take on f5 because of knight e5. Now, what's the point of e5? Here's the point, f4. Your king is protecting that bishop on d3. If you go back to e2, there's bishop g4. Yes, and if you go king d2 here, now black can go knight e7 and knight takes e5. And it should be winning for black. Yeah. This king is so vulnerable. That's why I didn't like this king e2 and exchange with queen on d2. Okay, it resembles this idea from the Grunfeld with the exchange on d2, but the problem was in the Grunfeld there's a d4 pawn. Yeah. In the Grunfeld there's a d4 pawn, but with the exchange on here on d2 there's no d4 pawn. The king is open, right? That lies the difference here. And e5 is just a strong move for Aronian. Now, if you protect that f4 square with g3, black gets e4. Let's say you take with the bishop, and there's f5. Now, you cannot move away from this square. Again, knight d5 is going to be played. So you have to go back to g2. Because if f3, there's e4 and knight e5. So you have to go all the way back to g2 and still e4, right? Knight e5 is coming. And you have to move your king back or your rook back, but now bishop e6. We have a fixed pass pawn. Bishop c4 is coming. Oh my god, it's just all black from here. So after f takes e5, f4, this is already winning. King into d2. A sorry pin for white. Now bishop into e6, threatening bishop c4, or even knight c4 check and knight takes e5. Yeah. Lagrave had to play king c3, rook c8. The rook comes into play. Your force takes, and the hallucination comes into play with king d4. And we have this mating net by Aronian. Aronian was very quick with that one, yeah. Pawn guarding the e3 square, the knight taking c3 and c5. Rook t8 is going to be checkmate. And one way of course, the best way to win a game is to have this mating nets or mating patterns. It's the main objective of the chess game, checkmate your opponent. And if you're familiar with all of these mating patterns, that would help you to win more games. Well, especially the elite, yeah, they would not miss this one. But even then, after rook takes c8, if Lagrave, for example, goes back to d2, black still gets this advantage with knight to d7. Yeah. If you attack that pawn on f4, knight takes e5, you still have to worry about the bishop because rook d8 is coming. You have to go back to e2 and the knight c4 check. You would take rook takes f4, now rook a4. Once black gets that pawn in a2, 2 connected pawns, still winning. Strong bishop. No counterplay for white. And let's take a look at one more square for the king here. Let's say king to b2. It's still knight d7. Yeah. Black gets this tempo on the d3 bishop. It's an extra move. And that's hard to deal. And its isolated pawn on e4 is also a target for the rook later in the game. Plus the majority, 2 for 1. Then again, king d4, knight a4 finishes the game in just 25. We can call this one a miniature. It's only 25 moves. If anything less than 25 or 25 or less, it's just miniature. So that was a pretty nice win by Aronian. Now he's tied for Wesley, because Wesley drew with the rapport in an opposite colored bishop ending. So that was it. That was round number 6 of Superbet Chess Classic 2022. Aronian winning over MVL. All right, thank you guys for your support on our channel, Charles Max Chess and Charles Max Entertainment on Facebook and YouTube. This is Coach Oliver. Stay safe, everyone.